Some killers hide their crimes. They wipe away fingerprints, destroy evidence, and hope their secrets are never uncovered. But what if the murderer didn't want to hide? What if he wanted to remember every second? This is the story of a man who stepped into his victim's home with a camera in one hand and cruelty in his heart. A man who not only took a life, but filmed it, frame by frame, as though it were his own twisted masterpiece. Imagine sitting at home on a rainy night, unaware that someone is watching from the shadows outside. You hear a sound, faint at first, then closer, until your world changes in an instant. Now imagine that person isn't just here to kill, but to record your final moments for his own pleasure. That's exactly what happened to Rachel Turner, and the truth of what her killer left behind would horrify even the most seasoned detectives. It began with a piece of evidence so disturbing that detectives later admitted it haunted them: a grainy, shaky video taken inside a quiet suburban home. At first glance, it could have been mistaken for a home movie, until the audio revealed a terrified woman's voice. The man holding the camera wasn't a filmmaker, he was a killer. Each step he took on the creaking floorboards, each slow breath, was recorded. This wasn't about evidence or a confession. This was about power, about capturing the exact moment he destroyed a life. What made it worse was the casual way he moved through the rooms, as though he belonged there. In the background, a faint television glow cast shadows along the walls, but in the center of it all sat Rachel Turner, tied to a chair, her face pale with fear. She was alive at that moment. Barely. Rachel lived in a place where people believed crime happened elsewhere. Neighbors left their doors unlocked in the daytime. Kids rode bikes until sunset. Rachel, a 32-year-old single mother, balanced work and raising her young son. She was polite, but private, a familiar face to the community, but never one to draw attention. No one could think of a single person who would wish her harm. Yet someone had been watching her. On the night it happened, rain fell steadily, masking the sound of footsteps. Outside her home, a hooded figure stood still for nearly 10 minutes, scanning the windows. To passing cars, he looked like someone waiting for a ride. In reality, he was timing his entry, memorizing the rhythm of the house. The killer didn't choose the front door. He moved toward the back, where the rain pooled on the patio. In less than 30 seconds, the lock was forced open. Rachel didn't have a security system, no alarm to alert the neighbors. She was in the living room, likely startled by the sudden sound behind her. The video later revealed the first chilling moments. The camera pointed at the floor, then slowly panning upward as the man approached. His voice, calm, deliberate, told her to sit. She was bound within minutes. The killer positioned the camera as though he had done this before, narrating softly as he recorded. He zoomed in on framed family photos, running his fingers over Rachel's image. "Perfect," he whispered. Rachel's voice trembled. "Please, you don't have to do this," she begged. Her words were clear in the recording, the desperation unmistakable. The killer didn't respond with anger. He responded with amusement, as if her fear was part of the performance. Investigators later described this detail as one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. He wasn't in a rush. He wanted to savor every second. The video lingered on her face, on her wide eyes, scanning the room for any escape. Outside, the rain intensified, drowning out the faint sounds of her chair scraping against the floor as she shifted. But inside, there was no hope. Rachel's 7-year-old son was home that night. He had been in his bedroom when the break-in happened. At some point, Likely when he heard his mother's voice change from casual to terrified, he hid in the closet. Hours later, when police finally entered the home, they found him there, shaking, his eyes red from crying. He had not seen the killing itself, but he had seen the man. In his quiet, broken voice, he told detectives something that would change the investigation. Mommy knew him. This single detail shifted the case from a random home invasion to something far more personal. Detectives moved quickly. They secured Rachel's phone, computer, and social media accounts, piecing together her final days. They interviewed friends, co-workers, and family. The question loomed: who was Daniel Pierce? His name came up from a neighbor who remembered Rachel hiring him months earlier to repair a roof leak. Armed with a warrant, police entered Daniel's small apartment. What they found was chilling. In a locked cabinet were several VHS tapes and digital storage drives. Each contained footage of women, recorded inside their own homes. Some clips were clearly from hidden cameras placed in bedrooms, bathrooms, or hallways. Others showed Daniel himself, moving through the rooms while the occupants slept or were away. Rachel's tape was the final one, and the only one where the victim was visibly bound and aware. The pattern was clear. Daniel would establish a reason to be inside a woman's home, study it, and return later to invade her space on his own terms. Experts reviewing the tapes concluded Daniel's crimes were less about theft and more about dominance. He didn't just want to harm his victims, he wanted to own the moment, to freeze it in time. The recordings were trophies. This wasn't impulsive violence. It was meticulous preparation. He knew where the cameras wouldn't be seen, when his victims would be most vulnerable, and how to make them feel utterly powerless. The courtroom was silent when prosecutors described the contents of Rachel's tape. Only short segments were shown, enough to confirm Daniel's identity and his deliberate cruelty. Jurors avoided eye contact with the screen. The defense argued mental illness, claiming Daniel suffered from obsessive-compulsive tendencies that drove his actions. But the methodical planning, the careful choice of victims, and the preserved tapes painted a different picture. This was premeditated control, not uncontrollable madness. Several jurors later admitted they struggled to sleep during the trial. The audio from Rachel's tape, the trembling in her voice, the killer's steady breathing, played in their minds. One said, "You could tell he enjoyed it." That was the worst part. It wasn't rage, it was satisfaction. This insight proved powerful for the prosecution, framing Daniel not as a man overcome by mental illness, but as one who relished power over others. At sentencing, Rachel's family faced Daniel for the first time. Her sister stepped forward, her voice breaking. "You didn't just take her life. You recorded it so you could relive it. But we refuse to let you keep that power." The courtroom remained silent, except for the sound of muffled sobs. Daniel stared back, without expression, his hands resting calmly on the defense table. The judge delivered the verdict: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Daniel's crimes were deemed too dangerous, too calculated for society to ever risk his release. Even as the sentence was read, he showed no remorse. The tapes, now sealed in evidence, would never see public release, but the knowledge of their contents left an imprint on everyone involved in the case. Rachel's home still stands. The grass grows tall in the yard. Curtains remain drawn. Neighbors pass by slowly, remembering the woman who once sat on the porch, laughing while her son played nearby. Some say they still expect to see her wave from the window. The reality is harder to face, that her home became the stage for her final moments, captured forever on tape by a man who wanted to own them. The case sparked national discussions about privacy, home security, and the psychology of predators. Experts warned that technology had made it easier for stalkers to monitor their victims, but Daniel's case proved that some still relied on old-fashioned surveillance, eyes, memory, and patience. It was a reminder that danger isn't always distant. Sometimes it's the person you've let into your home. For Rachel's son, the events of that night will never fade. He's growing up without his mother, carrying memories no child should bear. But surrounded by family, he is slowly finding a way forward. The killer may be locked away, but the shadow of his crime lingers. In the end, this wasn't only the story of a murder, it was the story of a man who wanted to immortalize his cruelty. And while the justice system caged him, it could never erase the horrifying truth. For some killers, taking a life isn't enough. They need to watch it again. Police knew from the beginning that Daniel's crime was not an impulsive act. Every piece of evidence suggested planning. Surveillance cameras from a gas station 3 blocks away showed him buying gloves, batteries, and duct tape hours before the murder. In another clip from the same night, he appeared to be sitting in his car across from Rachel's house, engine off, watching. Investigators believed he was waiting for the perfect moment when Rachel's son would be in his room and the neighborhood was quiet. This was not someone who stumbled into violence. There were also unsettling visits to forums where users traded tips on surveillance equipment and hiding cameras in everyday objects. One folder contained photographs of multiple homes, including Rachel's, taken from different angles, front, side, and backyard. The discovery proved he had been watching her for weeks. A neighbor later came forward with an eerie memory. Just a week before the murder, she had seen Daniel standing in Rachel's driveway during the day, pretending to look at his phone. When she asked if he needed help, he smiled and said he was waiting for someone. It was such an ordinary interaction that she didn't think twice until the police showed her his mugshot. That smile, she said, was exactly the same in court. Prosecutors used these details to destroy any notion that Daniel's actions were sudden or accidental. They painted him as a predator who not only took lives but rehearsed them. They even brought in a criminal profiler who testified that keeping the tapes was Daniel's way of replaying the control long after the crime was over. Each video was like a trophy, a way to relive the dominance he felt in those moments. Rachel's co-workers were also called to testify. They described her as warm, kind, and someone who loved to bake treats for the office. But one woman remembered something unusual. Rachel had mentioned feeling uneasy a few weeks earlier. She told her friend she thought she saw someone outside her window at night, but convinced herself it was nothing. That one small comment became a haunting reminder of how quickly small doubts can turn into devastating truths. Daniel's defense team tried to shift the focus away from the tapes, claiming they were irrelevant to the murder itself. But the prosecution argued that the tapes were the very heart of the case. They proved motive, method, and mindset. Without them, Daniel might have been able to claim panic or self-defense. With them, there was no doubt. He wanted to keep a piece of his victims forever. Even after the guilty verdict, investigators admitted they still had unanswered questions. Were there more victims who never came forward? Were their tapes hidden somewhere else, waiting to be found? The chilling possibility meant detectives remained on alert, even with Daniel behind bars. Some cases they knew never truly end. For the people who lived in Rachel's neighborhood, the murder left a permanent scar. Families who once left doors unlocked now double-check every window. Parents keep children inside after dark. And every time it rains at night, Some of them remember that Thursday evening, the sound of water masking footsteps, and the knowledge that while they slept, a killer was inside one of their homes, recording every second. Rachel's killer is locked away now, his camera silenced, his trophies sealed in evidence forever. But the shadow of his crime still lingers over her home, over her family, and over a community that learned too late that danger doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles at you, fixes your roof, and waits. And while justice may have caged him, the truth remains. For some monsters, murder isn't enough. They need to see it again, and again, and again.